It's just my little prop for later. Hi, thank you for listening to me. So I'm going to teach you today how to be amazing at connection. But to be amazing at connection, you've got to be equally amazing at not letting in rejection. You have to be able to deal with rejection in order to be fantastic at connection, because we come onto the planet with two very, very powerful needs. Our first need is we must always find and maintain connection. And our second need is that we must always seek acceptance and avoid being rejected. And avoiding being rejected is very, very important. These are actual tribal needs. And we're all run by this instinctive need that we have to avoid being rejected, because when we were lived in a tribe, you couldn't survive unless you were connected. We were born instinctively knowing that we would make it on the planet, we would survive if we were connected to a group. Because as tribespeople, you couldn't hunt for food, you couldn't build a dwelling, and you couldn't raise a family unless you were connected. You needed that group to watch your back. And of course, the tribes understood that too. All groups knew that the way to make you conform was to threaten you with rejection. And if they threatened you with rejection, you would conform. So very difficult sailors would be marooned. They would be marooned on a desert island forever. Difficult prisoners were put into isolation. Many, many religious orders understood that if they threatened you with casting out or banishment, you would behave. And even children know how to send someone they don't like to Coventry. And of course, when parents send a naughty child to their room, they're disconnecting them from the group, they're rejecting them, and they're rejecting their behavior. So in Romeo and Juliet, when Romeo was banished from Verona, he said, "I'd rather be killed than banished. Banishment is worse than death. There's nothing out there but purgatory." And actually, he was right. My father lived in a tiny little village up north that had a really old church that had the original banishment window still there. Because in times gone by, if a villager didn't behave and didn't conform, they would be banished forever from that village. But they still had to go to church to try and redeem their wickedness. And they had to turn up after the service began. In all weathers, they had to crouch down by this banishment window and listen to the service outside. And then they left just before the service ended, because they were not allowed to have connection. So to this day, we fear being rejected. And the fear of rejection will hurt our ability to connect. So I'm sure most of you know what Stockholm Syndrome is, but Stockholm Syndrome is a study of what happens to people when you disconnect them. So people who've been taken hostage, people who've been kidnapped, people who've been imprisoned would rather befriend their enemy and often have sex with them too than be isolated, disconnected, and rejected. And of course, most of you have seen Homeland, haven't you? And in Homeland, he went to the other side because he was isolated and disconnected and rejected. So it's this tribal fear that we have. And if you think, yeah, but tribal fears don't exist, we're not in a tribe, just watch what women do when they're out in a group. If a woman go out in a group and one of them says, "I want to go to the toilet," they say, "Who's coming with me?" And they go, "I'll come," and "I'll come too." And women go to the toilet in groups, because in a tribe, a woman never, ever went to the toilet on her own. That was so dangerous. You didn't know what was out there. So women went off in groups to the toilet, and when they're in groups out, they still go to the toilet in a group. A man never says, "I need to pee, who's coming with me?" And if he did, no guy would go, "I'll come," and "I'll come too." Because men stand up to pee. Women literally had to have someone watch their backs. So we come onto the planet with this really intense need to be connected and to avoid being rejected. And these bonds of connection are very, very fragile, and they must not be broken. And what damages them is a fear of rejection. So I've been a therapist for many, many years, and I fly all over the world, and I have a great job, and I meet people who'll say, "Yeah, you know, I got bullied when I was 8, and to this day, I don't do groups. I won't go to a pub, I won't go to a party, I would never work in a big office. I might be rejected. It might remind me of what it felt like to be bullied." Or someone will say to me, "Yeah, the love of my life dumped me. I've never had a relationship since. I don't even want one, because I couldn't go through that pain again." Or somebody will say, "I was fired in front of everyone in my office. It was so humiliating. I've never had a job since." What they're saying is, being rejected was so painful, I'm now choosing to avoid rejection. But of course, what they're doing is they're avoiding connection. And you don't need to do that because you can't be rejected. We're not tribal people anymore. There's no way that you could ever be rejected because you have to believe everything the person that is rejecting you is saying. So if I said to you, I don't like you, I hate everyone that has green hair, and I really don't like you because I can't stand people that have purple hair, that's my opinion. It's so clearly wrong. You're not going to let that in. That can't possibly hurt you. It's an opinion that is wrong that you're not going to let in. And I'm going to be using this word let in a lot in the next 15 minutes, because if you take one thing away from today, let it be this: don't let in opinions that will hurt you. If I said to the back row, I don't like any of you, you're so boring, you're just so deeply dull, there's nothing to you, some of you will let that in. But it's just an opinion. It's no different to the other opinion. I'm saying something. You don't have to let that in. So I work with so many people damaged by rejection, particularly children. And in my years as a therapist, I've learned 5 techniques that will really help you, I guarantee it, to not let in rejection, to deal with it. You can't stop people rejecting you, but you can change the way it affects you. So let me teach you these 5 techniques. The first one is going to sound very trite, because simple things are often so simple, people think that can't work, it's too easy. And the first one is the kind of thing you do to deal with the everyday barbs that come from colleagues, friends, family members. So let's imagine someone comes up to you and says, you've got so fat, it doesn't suit you, you shouldn't have gained all that weight, or, oh, you should never have cut your hair, it looks terrible, or, why can't you control your children, they're so badly behaved. And what you say is, thank you for sharing that. Now, I know that sounds trite, and I know that sounds silly, but if someone comes up and says, wow, you're fat, and you go, how dare you say that, that's so hurtful, or you're so rude, or, well, you look anorexic to me, or you try eating healthy food on my salary, you've already let it in, and now you're trying to deal with it by sarcasm or hurt, criticism. When you say, thank you for sharing that, what you're saying is, that's your opinion, you can even say it, I don't have to let that in. I was driving through Los Angeles, well actually my husband was driving through Los Angeles last year in peak traffic, and he took the wrong freeway, and his adult son in the back was really cross, and he started to say, you always do this, why didn't you plan the route, and now we're going to be late. And my husband went, thank you for sharing that. And he went, yeah, but you're so wound up, and now I'm getting really stressed, and you're ruining the evening. And he said, thank you for sharing that. And then his son said something else, and he said again, thank you for sharing that. And I thought, this is so cool. I taught him this. He's doing it. It's working. We got to our destination, and actually it was all dissipated, because saying thank you for sharing that dissipated. They both forgot. They were fine. And thank you for sharing that really works, particularly with adult or teenage children. So my daughter would occasionally go, I hate you. You're the worst mother in the world. Hitler was nicer than you. And all my friends' parents let them go out all night to sleepovers. And I just go, thank you for sharing that. Thank you for sharing. I didn't argue whether, what's the point? And when you say thank you for sharing that, you dissipate the tension and you don't let it in. So that simple, those simple little words, thank you for sharing that. I promise you, if you use them, it will change everything. So that's a simple one for the everyday family member, tribal barbs. But let's imagine you're at work and someone comes up to you and says, oh my God, why did you ever offer to speak in public? You should never have chaired that meeting. You were so bad, I was embarrassed for you. And what you say to them is, I'm sorry, I didn't actually hear all of that. Would you repeat that for me slowly so I can hear it? Don't ever say so I can let it in. Would you repeat that so I can hear it? And I promise you, 90% of the time they go, oh, me and my big mouth, just ignore me. I'm having a really bad day. I didn't mean it. What's happened is you've asked them to repeat it. They've had to think about it. And they've decided to retract it. And they will retract it 90% of the time. And when they do, don't go, no, tell me what you said. I want to know, what did you say? You've got to also let it dissipate. So, I'm sorry, would you repeat that, please? I didn't hear it all. Will work. Of course, sometimes they will repeat it. They'll say, yeah, I just said, you were so wooden at public speaking, it's actually an insult to wood. And now you get to technique 3, which is to say, oh, are you trying to hurt my feelings? Are you trying to make me feel bad about myself? Amazingly, they will usually go, no, of course not. I just thought you should know that you're so painful at public speaking, you need to practice more, or get some help, or never speak in public again. So although what they're saying is very hurtful and harsh, they don't mean it. I was in Sainsbury's many years ago, and somebody rang my cell phone, and it was Cosmo. Cosmo went, oh, hi, just to let you know that we've done a big article about you. It's in Cosmo, it's out today. And it's on this CD you've made called How to Attract and Maintain a Loving, Lasting Relationship. So I put down the phone and went to the newsstand and got 2 copies and went back and went, hey, Mum, look, I'm in Cosmo. They've written about my CD, How to Attract Love. And she said, I don't want to read that. I'm not going to read that. I don't think you should ever make CDs about attracting loving relationships because you're not very good at them. And I was like, okay, I know what to do. I didn't bother to go to 1. Thank you for sharing that. I didn't actually bother to go to 2, which is, could you repeat that? I mean, this is my mother after all, so I didn't have to say, please repeat that. I went straight to technique 3. Are you trying to hurt my feelings? Why would you say that? And she said straight away, of course I'm not trying to hurt your feelings, not at all. I just think you should stick to the things you're really good at, and then you'll be even more successful than you already are. And of course, what she was saying was not mean and not hurtful, but it sounded that way, and I didn't let it in because I understood her intention. And one of my patients came to see me. Now, she was nursing her husband through the final weeks of an illness, and he was going to die, and she was very upset. But she was very upset because every time she said to her friends, my husband's dying, they'd go, oh, you'll be fine. You'll find someone else. You'll be okay. And she was absolutely hurt. And I said, but why don't you listen to the intention? What are they saying? And she said, yeah, they're saying, you're so lovable, we love you. You won't be on your own. And actually, she was married to somebody else within a year, and she is very happy. So we've got the first 3, but of course you will get the person who says, yeah, that's what I said. So let's go to technique 4 now. You've said to them, are you trying to hurt my feelings? And they go, yes, I don't like you, I hate you. I want you to know everyone hates you. And then you simply say, well, that's not going to work because I'm not going to let that in. Again, here's that word, you never have to let it in. So I met someone who at 55, who was a doctor, decided to run the marathon to get a scanner for his hospital. And he was very out of shape, and he ran the marathon. And he came in towards the end, but he was so delighted. And when he went back to work, one of the very buff, fit doctors went, yeah, I heard you ran the marathon, and you came in like last. He went, last? I was first in my category. They went, what category is that? He went, 55-year-old out-of-shape doctor from this hospital, raising money, running a marathon to get a scanner. I was number 1 in my category. He didn't let it in. So now you have these 4 things. Thank you for sharing that. Please repeat that slowly. Are you trying to make me feel bad about myself? I'm not going to let that in. And there is a 5th technique, but don't ever do it with sarcasm, which is to say, while we're sharing, did you know that critical people have the most criticism reserved for themselves? They don't like themselves. They're expressing outwards their own dissatisfaction. When you do this, you're showing me, and everyone else in the office too, that you're your own worst critic. So for a critical person, let's imagine this is a seesaw. And here's you, and here's them. But in their world, it isn't equal. You're up there, and they're down there. And all they can do to make it balance is to diminish you. And they actually want that to happen. But they can only do that by making you feel bad about yourself. And then you've got your 5 techniques. Nobody can ever make you feel bad about yourself unless you let them. So I can only tell you that this works, because if this didn't work, there's not a chance I could stand in front of you talking like this and loving it and actually enjoying it, because the greatest fear in the Western world is the fear of speaking in public, which is actually not a fear of speaking in public, it's a fear of being rejected. And a lot of people can't do it. I had a client who came to me who actually fainted at his own wedding rehearsal when he had to rehearse the speech. I had another one who said, I've got to talk at a funeral. I'm so scared. Frankly, I'd rather be in the coffin than giving that eulogy, because it's a fear of being rejected. And I understand that, because when I was 25, a publishing house came to me and gave me a lot of money to write a book. And I couldn't do it. Every time I sat down to write, I kept thinking, what if nobody likes it? What if that's wrong? What if it gets really badly reviewed? And I gave the advance back because I was so caught up with the rejection that I didn't actually understand the fantastic connection you get from being a writer. And I meet other people who go, yeah, I want to write a book. And I go, what are you doing to write a book? Nothing. I said, have you got an agent? Oh, no. Or they want to be an actor. What are you doing to be an actor? Have you going to auditions? Oh, I couldn't do that. Why not? I might be rejected. And I'm like, look, until you can deal with rejection, you're never going to be an actor. You can't have one without the other. It's like the weave of a cloth. But when you learn that you can't be rejected, then I wrote 5 or 6 best-selling books. In fact, someone wrote to me recently and went, God, I'm so glad I got your book. I went to visit my mother, who's very ill with cancer, and as I left, she said to me, I hope you get cancer and die. And he went, wow, Mum, even for you, that's a bit hardcore. He said, but you know what? It didn't hurt me. I didn't let it in. I remembered what you said. She's bitter and she's unhappy. He said, I once would have been on the floor with depression that my mother said that, but I didn't let it in. So let me share with you my favourite story, because it's such a metaphor for not letting it in. So a journalist went to interview a holy man, already deciding he hated spiritual people, and he met him, and of course the holy man was beaming and smiling, as they do, and he said, I can't stand tree huggers like you. This is all pseudo, it's all fake, you're not really spiritual, I don't like you. And the holy man beamed and smiled even more, so he cranked up the rejection and continued to tell him why he hated him, and the holy man continued to beam and smile. So finally he said, why are you beaming and smiling while I tell you that I don't like you? And he went, well, you see, if you give me a gift, but I don't take the gift, who has the gift? And the journalist went, me? And he went, exactly. I'm not taking that. And if I don't take it, it's left with you. It's rather like being served legal papers. If you don't take them, you are not served. So please remember these 5 techniques. Nobody can reject you ever unless you let them. And my little girl was 5. This is the first time I learnt this. And in some ways, my mother was right, because I didn't write that book because of my fear of rejection. I didn't have loving relationships because I was all scared about being rejected. Of course, I'm not now. I wouldn't be up here. So my daughter went to a little village school, and she had a boy in her class who had cerebral palsy and had a real problem walking. And his mother used to say to him all the time, baby, people look at you because you're so beautiful. They stare at you because you're the most handsome boy in the world. And this little village school went to London to a museum. He'd never been on a tube. He'd never been on an escalator. But off he went. He came back. He went, Mum, I must have been so handsome today because everyone stared at me on the tube. And on the escalator, I was so beautiful. They all looked at me. And on the museum, everybody looked at me. And you see, those bonds, those fragile bonds of connection aren't broken in him. And by the time he understands what that's really all about, it won't matter, because he started his life not letting it in. So please learn those 5 things. Thank you for sharing. Would you repeat that slowly? Are you trying to hurt my feelings? That's not going to work. And remind them what critical people are. And thank you very much for listening.